Right then, good morning everyone. Thank you for joining us for our latest how-to webinar. Delighted to say we're here with Laura, and I'll get her to introduce herself in a second. Now, today's subject is a subject very close to my heart, so I'm really looking forward to this one. So Laura's going to talk to us how to ensure you spend time networking that's not a drain on your diary. I guess we've all experienced networking very different in the last year or so things will be evolving on that front, but I'm really interested to hear what Laura's got to say on it. So, Laura, without further ado, I'll hand over to you and let you go for it.
Thank you. No pressure there, Mike.
No.
So I'm Laura. I run a company called Chroma Marketing. We are a specialist in marketing strategy for small businesses. And the reason I kind of proposed to do this how-to session is a lot of the time, one of the key areas that my clients are finding a drain is networking. They've done loads of it in the past. They've tried all different types, and actually they're not finding they're getting anything from it. I can 99% guarantee that there's a reason for that. And so what I'm going to do today is just quickly share my screen so that we can kind of get stuck in. So, like Mike said, what we're going to talk about today is how to ensure that spending time networking isn't a drain on your diary. And what we're going to do is break this down into 4 key sections. So the first bit we're going to do is actually just kind of go right back to the beginning. I find it easier with these topics to kind of draw a line, start fresh with an understanding of what actually these things are, and then move into the kind of strategy process, etc. So we're going to break down what networking actually is. Then we're going to look at why networking is an important part of your marketing strategy. We're then going to think about and talk about the biggest mistake that I see happening when people network, and why that drain is happening, why that diary is full of nothing, basically. And then we're going to go into how to make it efficient and effective. As usual, I will kind of take a bit of a break after each of these sections in case there's any questions or anything we want to talk about. Otherwise, if there's any questions and you want to talk about it specifically to your business, feel free to drop me a message. So let's get stuck in. So what is networking? Networking is the process of speaking to professional contacts and sharing information with them. I class networking as one of the kind of 5 top lead generating types of marketing. And the reason being is because with those 5, they're all places where you have to engage with your audience. You actually speak to those people directly. So it's not putting a message out to a blank room. It's not you're stood in a conference waiting for people to kind of come round. It's you speaking directly to potential prospects and strategic partners. So in this case, what we're going to break down are the different types of networking so that we can see what types of environments you might be finding yourself in, and hopefully what this will do is just reposition some of the mindset around how you can treat those events, and the kind of things you need to be looking out for as a business person to make that time more effectively spent. So there's 4 key types of networking. You've got casual contact, strong contact, professional associations, and online communities. Some people will argue with me about that final one, but you do have that direct conversation with people. So again, in that respect, and going right back to the kind of definition of what networking is, it does count. So let's break some of these down. Casual contact networking. Here are some key factors and key kind of, not demographics, but flags to know that you're in a casual contact networking environment. There tend to be more informal meetings, a bit more chatty. You will find that they have guest speaker slots generally. They might not be big speaker slots, that's more conference style, training style, but you'll have maybe 10-15 minutes, very similar realistically to what happens at the Northern Affinity at some of their events. They're held regularly, but not too often. So it's that kind of light touch point with these people every month generally. Some might be quarterly. And the focus with these events, more often than not, especially for small businesses, is making new contacts. So it's going into a room of new people, or breakout rooms on Zoom with people that you're not familiar with. That's the focus. More than anything, it's about building new relationships, whereas in other areas, it's more focused on maybe sales. So if you spend a lot of time here at these events, you need to be aware of the fact that realistically, those events aren't, because of their informal nature, they're not set up to be a selling platform. You're not there to pitch to people every 30 seconds. It's more about getting to know the people that are in the room, getting to know who is potentially a strategic partner that you can collaborate with, using the guest speaker slots to leverage your expertise. So that's your casual contact networking. You've then got the strong contact network, and this is where things like BNI fall. Things like, to an extent, your 4Ns, those kinds of networking events which are driven by making new business. So these events tend to have a more formal structure. They tend to be over lunch or breakfast, maybe, where you've got a limited amount of time. It's not necessarily part of your working day. It's kind of a chunk out of that. They also tend to be membership based. So everybody knows with BNI, for example, you pay a membership for your year. And the reason for that is because of the fact that it's focused solely on selling. It's focused on referrals. It's focused on getting you those new clients rather than building wider relationships. And with these ones, you kind of find that they are polar opposites. You either find that they're held really regularly or quite sporadically. I would say with BNI, obviously that's a weekly thing. With some others that are maybe more industry specific in this category, they might be held less often, so it's maybe more quarterly, but they still have the same goals. So then you've also got your professional associations. This is very much an industry specific event. So you'll find that, for example, Chartered Institute of Marketing will host events that are purely for marketing professionals. Similarly with accountants and charities, you've got events that are specific to their industry. And what you find with that is that often there's an element of training involved, or an element of CPD, so continued professional development. Again, with these, they are membership based more often than not, so that because of the chartering element or because of the accreditation that's involved, you tend to pay for that. And the whole purpose of these events is adding value to the members. So it's a lot of sharing information. So it might be upcoming trends. It might be that they have more kind of workshop style parts of the events. Things that to look out for here are anything run by your local LEP. So the Leeds City region do loads of these through the Digital Knowledge Exchange, for example. So with these, the key point of difference is that these events are more about learning, whereas the others are more about people. And then the final one is your online communities. The biggest difference between the three types of networking that I mentioned before and this is that this is very much self-directed. You're in charge of your own kind of network online. You're in control of who's part of it and who you engage with, whereas with events, you don't know who's going to turn up. I find that a lot of the time this works best as an extension of attending events. So using LinkedIn as the primary example here, and LinkedIn groups maybe, you might find that there are groups set up for your professional associations. And when you meet new people, you connect with them on LinkedIn, you engage within the groups based on feedback and topics that were discussed. The main thing about this is cultivating relationships between industry professionals, and that can cross the kind of board really. It doesn't have to be people in marketing. It can be people, for myself, it might be a business coach, it might be a finance person, it might be somebody in law. It's about those kind of wider relationships and how you use those and maintain them through the online communities based on meeting people at events. And one of the biggest benefits of your online communities is that they very much focus on building credibility. So you can get on LinkedIn your recommendations, which build trust. there's loads you can do to kind of add on to people's perception of what your area of expertise is. So I think going back to the kind of the focuses of these 4 areas, you have building relationships, building sales, building knowledge, and building credibility. And really, when it comes to networking, a kind of a good strategy to have is a mix of them all, because you get value from different places and you can add value to your brand in different ways by using those 4 types. The next kind of stage is talking about why we network. So Mike, are there any initial questions on that, do you think, or points?
Yeah, I guess for me, I completely agree with you. I think that the 4 different types broadly are in that areas. I guess the key for anyone is to, like you said, have a mixture, not necessarily of all 4, but of a number of them. Yeah. But the second point is also to understand which one you're in at any particular time. Yeah. So going to a more casual one and focusing on referrals is going to be, you're not going to get anywhere, and obviously kind of the opposite as well. So I guess that's the point there, is kind of understanding which situation you're in. Yeah. And then the only other point for me, the online communities is a really strong one. I mean, that is what, I mean, LinkedIn's, like I said, the biggest example. And I would say to anybody that treat it like a networking event, on like an ongoing event. And I think you can get some real value from that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is the bit that often gets missed. So we'll kind of come back to that later. But yeah, so I think the main thing really, and I'm not saying you have to be a part of a professional body, you have to be a member of BNI. At the end of the day, you've got to do what's best for your business, but you've said it exactly right, Mike. It's about understanding what room you're in so that you go with the right mentality. So if you do go to a referral event, you need to be referring to other people, not just that building relationships and hoping that you're going to get those referrals back.
Yeah, and I think as well, Laura, it's probably you kind of touched on there as well, what people feel happy and comfortable in as well. That's really important, and you only do that by trying, going to all sorts of different things and then building it from there. So it's important to enjoy it as well, quite frankly.
Yeah, absolutely. At the end of the day, if you're enjoying something, you're going to be more confident when you are there. So your whole demeanor will be more strong at the end of the day, so you'll get across your value more effectively. So if you don't enjoy an environment, don't go. There's no pressure just because Joe down the road is doing it. It doesn't mean you have to, because it's all about understanding the return that you're going to get from your investment, and investment isn't just money, it's time. So that's why it's really, really important that you know where you are as part of your wider strategy and how that's going to help you. So why network? I kind of touched on this before, but networking is one of the strongest lead generating types of marketing because it's all founded on word of mouth and relationships. And let's face it, and I think Jag might have even posted about this the other day, word of mouth marketing is the strongest type of marketing there is because people trust it so much more than you posting your own content. And that's the basis of networking, is that you're meeting people, you're forming relationships, you're talking to each other and helping each other. It's not, you're not kind of limiting yourself by your content and all of that stuff. So why network? There's 4 things here to listen out for when you're networking. The first one is long-lasting relationships. Especially with the first type of networking that we talked about, the slightly more casual, the benefit you get from building relationships is unreal. And it's because of the fact that you attend those events regularly, you kind of commit to your communities. It's so much easier to build relationships with people in that community, and those relationships, they're people that are kind of there as your net. Especially as a sole business owner, it can be very isolating. So actually having this group of people that you see on a regular basis, even if it's just once a month, can really give you that confidence, and also just somebody to talk to if you need something. You'll find that there's a wide array of types of people in the room. So actually, you could get help on your insurance or your finance or anything like that because of the fact that you've got some really solid relationships and you trust these people, and that's what it's all about. You build trust with them and they can trust you. So that's one thing to kind of listen out for and pay attention to while you're networking. Another thing is new sales opportunities. At the end of the day, any form of marketing should lead to generating leads and sales. And if it's not, that's when you need to kind of check yourself and say, right, why am I spending time here? Am I in the right room? Am I taking the right approach? Like we said before, if it's not a referral-based group, don't go in asking for loads of referrals. But at the end of the day, regardless of what room you're in, sales opportunities should arise. And those sales opportunities might be a knock-on effect. It might not be a direct kind of factor. So you might form a relationship with somebody who introduces you to somebody else and they can introduce you into a sales opportunity. But that's all stemmed from that networking activity. In the referral marketing side of things, so in the kind of more referral-based events, the strong networking groups, that's referral driven. So if you're not getting those referrals, it's right, what do I need to be doing to get more of these referrals? And actually, a lot of the time, if you're not giving enough referrals, you won't get the referrals back. So constantly while you're networking, whether it's in person, online, on LinkedIn, you need to be aware of the fact that it should be generating you sales opportunities. The third thing is strategic partnerships. And if I'm completely honest, this is where I think the biggest strength of networking lies. Strategic partnerships are unbelievably useful for building your expertise and your profile as a business, for getting you relationships with people who can add value to your customers, your potential customers. You can add value to theirs. You can do collaboration projects. I mentioned Jag, he's announced this morning that he's done the podcast with Gemma. That's a great collaboration based on a strategic partnership. So they're the kinds of things you want to be looking out for is, right, one, how can I access a new audience by being partnered with another business? Two, how can I add value to my current customers and potential customers based on these partnerships? And also, where's the gap that needs filling? I don't do everything when it comes to marketing, for example, but I will work with people like Fliss, people like Gemma, to fill those gaps. And it's really important that I have those relationships, because if I didn't, I wouldn't be able to add that value to my customers, and that limits myself. The other benefit of strategic partnerships is the creativity that comes with it. We can get quite bogged down in the monotonousness of marketing. Social media, I hear it so often with, I've not posted in a week, I need to put something out, what do I put? Or I've been networking for ages, I'm not really enjoying it, I'm finding it a drain on my diary. Right, let's get creative. Who is in that room that you can do something creative with? Could you run a podcast? Could you pull together a webinar? Could you write a blog with each other? Could you host an event? There's so many things that you can do that are different because of these strategic partnerships. And then the final one in this is finding inspiration and ideas. Kind of touching on what I just said, really. When you are kind of at a bit of a loss with your own marketing and networking, especially, use it as an opportunity to kind of sit back and observe, see what other people are doing, see what is being released, talk about things that are happening in the world that's not the everyday madness that we're sat in right now. Talk about things that are a little bit different, find some new ideas, go to different events to see what else is happening, because what you might have found is that you've kind of come to a stalemate in the room that you're in. So, right, let's move you into a different room. Let's move you into a different event or a different group on LinkedIn and see from there where you can find that inspiration from, where you can get those new ideas of things to try. So when it comes to why networking is really valuable, all these 4 reasons are just some of them. But the main things is that the long-lasting relationships, the new sales opportunities, the strategic partnerships, and that kind of inspiration, creativity. Before I move on, I think I saw the chat ping. Is there any questions or anything?
It was a point. I think before you start this section, I actually made a note I was going to bring up, and you've kind of covered it fantastic on there. Is that this difference between long and, I guess, long and short term? It's a bit like anything in the business. We the short term goals and things, and longer term. And what we've got up on the screen there, the kind of two things on the left hand side, I see as a long term
Definitely.
ideas. You're trying to push for your business, not necessarily for today, it might be for 2 years, 3 years down the line, even longer.
Yeah.
Whereas the things on the right hand side, not necessarily short term, but a bit more short term. Getting inspiration, getting a new idea, it's motivation, and same with sales to an extent. The kind of more sales work, that is generally a little bit more of a short term relationship. So I think that's again important to building your strategy. It's the balance of the two.
Yeah, absolutely. With networking, it is generally a little bit, or the effective networking is a little bit more of a slow burner, to be honest, because it takes time for you to trust people and for people to trust you. And at the end of the day, it's that trust where all of these opportunities come from, regardless if it's a strategic partner collaboration or a sales opportunity. All of that comes from building trust, and that takes time. So there is definitely a long-term approach and awareness that needs to be had with networking. It's not going to happen overnight. But things like finding ideas and inspiration is. So I think when it comes to networking, what you need to be aware of is and it kind of brings it back to your kind of overall business strategy. What are your short and long-term goals, and where does networking fit within that? I think that's absolutely right. So, number 3, this is where we're going to start talking about that drain. So the biggest mistake I see in networking is that people only attend the events. Attending events is great, don't get me wrong. And it's part of the picture, and that's the important thing, is only part of it. The biggest mistake I see is that then once the event is finished, people go home, log onto their emails and crack on with work, and nothing else is done. That, if I'm being completely honest, is a massive waste of time, because you don't have, especially when we're not doing it over Zoom, especially when we're doing it in person, you potentially drive for up to an hour depending on traffic to get to an event. You're then at the event for 2 hours. You might have a one-to-one afterwards, and then you go home, which is another up to an hour. So you've potentially lost the majority of a day to this networking event when we're doing it back in person. Yes, it's different on Zoom, but it's still like a 2-hour chunk of your time, which time's precious. In that regard, if you then don't actually action anything from that event, there's no point going, if I'm being completely honest. And this is where the strategy comes in. This is where you need to start putting processes in place to make your life easier, but to make it so that these networking events are actually effective for your business. So what we're going to do is talk about how we do that. So an effective process, number 1, attend a mix of the different event types. Because if you've got your different objectives, which we were just talking about, for a year or for 2 years for business, you need to be kind of playing to those objectives. So if you want to build your profile as a business person, build your kind of observed expertise, things like attending those events where the guest speaker slots are available, so that you can host a guest speaker slot and kind of talk more to people about what you do, why you do it. That naturally conveys that level of trust. So attending a mix of types. If you're driven by sales and you've got certain sales targets, you need to be in the room where the sales is a little bit more commonplace. Attending the mix of event types is the first thing that you really need to be doing in order to make networking effective, because of those different objectives. And when doing that, if I'm being completely honest, if you are finding yourself at a loss when it comes to networking, if you sat there thinking, I just don't have time for it, it takes too much time, I don't get anything from it, right, you need to draw a line under where you're at now and start fresh. And the best way of doing that is to kind of overanalyze the situation for a little while. So start tracking how many opportunities come from or you see at events that you're attending. So start playing around with some different ones, put yourself in different rooms, different communities. And when you're in those rooms, what I would suggest you do is set up something like an Excel sheet or a Google sheet, whatever it looks like, where you are rating the events. And what it makes you do is consciously see how things like how well you fit in with the group. Are there people who you could do collaborations with? Are there potential prospects? Is the atmosphere the kind of atmosphere you're looking for? Are there speaker slots? Are there online communities as part of this event? You know, all of these things that we've just been talking about as benefits of networking, how well are they being delivered in that room? And basically do that for a good kind of couple of months, because realistically, you're not going to be able to get to loads of events in a month. And if you are doing that, you're probably doing too many. So for a good couple of months, clean slate and start tracking the level of opportunity you see at those events. And the level of opportunity isn't just sales. And that's the really important thing to kind of make sure you're factoring in. When you're tracking those events, if you literally give something a 1 star, don't go back. If you're giving anything lower than a 3, anything above a 3 has got great potential. Anything below that, don't go back, because it's not the right fit for you based on your objectives. And then what you can do is fine tune the places where you're putting yourself and your brand based on how successful, how many opportunities you think are going to come from that event. When you've got that, the other thing to think about is actually who's in the room. And this is where you want to start your following up process. And you may find that actually you're too busy to devote loads of time to this follow-up process, which is why this is really important. It's great meeting loads of new people at events. You know, you can make friends, you can form relationships with people you'd never have formed relationships with. But the brutal honesty is that you don't have time to spend with everybody. If you're in a business and all you're doing is one-to-ones and networking, you're not going to get much done other than that. So realistically, there are 3 segments of people. So when you're in that room, or when you've kind of gone home from that room, or you've ended the Zoom meeting, what you need to have is a list that's segmented into 3 groups. The first group are people that are potential prospects, people who have kind of hinted at you in the conversation that they may need your services. And those people are pretty obvious, to be honest. So it's more of there might be 1 or 2 that hint that they might like a further conversation about what you do. Make note of those. The main people to make note of, especially in the kind of first casual groups, the kind of more informal, are your strategic partners, potential strategic partners. Are there people that you can pull out of that room who you think, do you know what? You know, for me, they're a videographer. There might be some stuff that we could do together. Or for, I don't know, a financial broker, for example. Okay, this is somebody in insurance. Maybe they know people who we could partner and collaborate with. So are there strategic partners in the room? And if there are, you need to put them into a list. Because if there are only a couple, and maybe it's their first time at that event as well, you potentially would question, again, the level of opportunity at that event. So pull out your prospects, anybody that notes that they want to talk to you, pull out your strategic partners, and then the last group of people, that everybody else are your nice to haves. And those are people who realistically, you're not going to be able to give much value to them. They're not going to be able to give much value to you. So it's nice to be connected. It's nice to know who they are in case you ever do in the future need something. But realistically, based on your short-term and long-term goals, that value both ways isn't there. So you don't really need to do much more with those people. And when you're evaluating the kind of return on investment from a networking event, when you're tracking that level of opportunity, what you need to look at is the balance between those 3 groups of people. If it's heavily weighted on the nice to haves, it's probably not the best event for you to go to. If it's more weighted on the potential prospects and the strategic partners, great, because you know there's those collaborative projects, you know that there's potential sales and long-term relationships. So that's your kind of 3 segments to have. And again, to be honest, I would just have something like an Excel sheet with 2 tabs on, one for the ratings and one for the people, because the one for the people is then going to enforce your follow-up process. The follow-up process we'll go into in a little bit more depth in a second, but if basically what you need to be making sure is that you've got dedicated time after networking to follow up with those prospects and strategic partners. And there are certain ways that you can do that to make it more effective and less, again, a drain on your diary. But what you're doing by consciously looking at who's in the room and kind of what level of opportunity you think you're going to get from that event, you're being really specific on where you spend your time, exactly like you would on Facebook, LinkedIn, or email marketing. And then the final bit is that ongoing relationship building. The biggest thing that we've talked about is that trust. And for any trust to come from a networking event, it needs to happen over the long term. So if you're not managing the relationships you're trying to build on an ongoing basis, you're not going to build that level of trust that you need in order to get those leads and opportunities. So really, when it comes to networking, the effective process is essentially attending a mix of events, kind of drawing a line under where you are, attend a mix of events and track the opportunity levels at those events. Figure out who's in the room, and do this regardless of whether it's a new event or not, who's in the room that you need to follow up with and who's a nice to have, and build those ongoing relationships, manage that yourself. And that from networking is where you should be spending your time, not, doing loads of events for nothing, really. And the kind of star, the asterisk at the bottom there, is if one of your goals is to build your profile, you need to be trying to get speaker slots, because that is where you can convey your value more clearly. You might only have 30 seconds as a big group to say what you do, but actually, and yes, you might have breakout rooms, but that's only to a small group of people. But if you can get those speaker slots, that's where you're going to be able to convey your value more clearly. Are there any questions before I go through this at all, Mike? Do you think, or any points there?
No, I'm really glad you mentioned what you did there, Laura, about the kind of all the other stuff you need to do around just turning up. Now, I once heard someone equate it to deciding you're going to use email marketing for your business. Set up MailChimp, get all your contacts in there, write some lovely emails, are fantastic, and then not pressing send.
Yeah.
That's the equivalent of just turning up and then going home and doing it. You've kind of done the hard work as such, but you've not got the rest and kind of where the benefits will come from it. So I'm really glad you mentioned that.
So on that note then, once you've segmented your audience, here are a couple of things to talk about in that process. And with this, if anybody, like I said at the beginning, if anybody wants to talk about their specific process, please just contact me, because there are some kind of points I can give you and resources that I have. So with that then, you've segmented your audience into the 3 columns. So you've got your prospects, your strategic partners, and everybody else. And this is where some of the suggestions I'm going to make are going to leave people uncomfortable. But actually, to be honest, that's the good thing. Realistically, it's about making that process more effective. And in doing so, you're going to get more value from it. So while it might feel a little bit, your shoulders go up, it's something that it would be worth you getting into the process of doing so that you can form those relationships. So prospects. Essentially, with these 3 groups of people, you've got very different follow-up processes because of the type of relationships you're trying to build. If you find that in that room there is somebody who's hinting at you that they want a conversation, the first thing you need to do after that event is get on the phone and call them and say, "It was great meeting you. You hinted at this. Shall we get a one-to-one booked in so we can talk about it more?" And that's all you're doing on that phone call. You're not selling to them, you're not pitching to them, but getting them on the phone means that you can get that one-to-one booked and you've got that time in their diary to talk to them. So your prospects, your primary focus there is getting that call, getting that one-to-one booked in, and then contact them on LinkedIn and connect with them on LinkedIn. You might then use email to send them a case study of something similar based on your conversation on the phone. It's the first thing you want to do with a prospect is get them in your diary so that you are taking control of the situation and you're putting them into your pipeline. If you don't do that and you kind of just lukewarmly connect with them on LinkedIn and nothing else, you've lost that opportunity, because what you need to do with a prospect is keep as much momentum and excitement as possible. And by contacting them, what you're doing is showing them that you are interested and excited about what they were talking about. Whereas a kind of a lukewarm connection on LinkedIn, maybe you forgot to put a comment on that message when you're connecting with them, that's not going to kind of create any form of excitement for people. So actually you're started with a kind of deflated balloon. So prospects, get on the phone, then connect with them on LinkedIn. When it comes to strategic partners, this is very much because of the long-term relationship kind of factor. You can generally take it a little bit slower. So there's no immediate need to book a one-to-one with them on the phone. What you'll find with those people is that you want to be connected with them on LinkedIn so that you can engage with their content. You can show them that you're interested in what they're talking about. And again, get a one-to-one booked in, but make it a really focused one-to-one about how you can help each other. Generate some ideas of things that you could, projects you could do together. But the main thing really is half an hour, one-to-one, where you talk about who they're looking to be introduced to, who you're looking to be introduced to, what similar circles you might float around in, all of that stuff. Because that's where you know more about that business. You can start building that relationship and building that trust and introducing them to people that they might not have contact with. And that's where the value comes across in strategic partners. And with those people, the really, really important thing is that you don't just do it once. It's really kind of vital, to be honest. If you want to build those long-term relationships and you're maybe only seeing these people once a month at an event, what is really good to do is have your initial one-to-one, which really is focused on for half an hour, who you're looking to be introduced to and so on. And then touch base with people at least every quarter, so that you know what's going on in their business. They might have stumbled upon a project and you're kind of reinforcing in their mind that you do something that might help them. It might be that they're looking specifically to work with an accountant or something, and you've just been introduced last week to an accountant at another event. So actually what you're doing, because you're checking in regularly, you're able to find out more about their situation as a business. You're able to build that kind of relationship to a point where you can then start having conversations about collaboration projects, about things like guest blogs, videos, all of that jazz. But what you find is that from the networking event, your priority needs to be the prospects, and then you go to the strategic partners list. And the best way of doing this, which I'll talk about in a little bit, is actually, again, tracking it, so that you know and you're prompted because of HubSpot or whatever that you need to connect with this person because you've not spoken to them for a few months. You don't want to go year after year without speaking to a strategic partner, because that's when that kind of excitement is lost with those people. When it comes to everybody else, the key thing to remember here, as brutal as it sounds, is that they are very much nice to haves. And so with those, great to be connected on social media, but realistically, booking a one-to-one with those people isn't a priority, because you're not going to be able to add value to them. They're not going to be able to add value to you straight away. So actually being connected on LinkedIn is enough. You might find that later down the line, you bump into them at another event and then you can catch up a little bit more. And the whole point of this is that you really should have other areas of marketing in your kind of marketing strategy, not just networking. And so it's important that you're not spending time on nice to haves when actually you can maintain relationships with those people on LinkedIn and use that as part of your social media strategy instead. So realistically, once you've segmented your group, there are kind of 3 key places that you want to be talking to these people. LinkedIn, so that you can engage and, comment on each other's stuff and all that stuff. Email, I would say, just from my experience, it's easier if you direct people to email and have conversations on email when it comes to booking one-to-ones, because then you don't lose LinkedIn messages and all that stuff. And if it's prospects, the last thing you want to do is lose that conversation. And then phone call. Prospects, the first thing you do after that event is call them. And then you can kind of just get that in the diary, have your Zoom call or have your meeting over coffee, which is more about learning about those people. So that's when it comes to from the previous slide, when you're segmenting the attendees and that follow-up process, that's essentially what it is. And it might be that you find it useful to have like some templated structures. Go for it. If it makes your life easier to have some templated structures, which you can amend for each person, so it is still tailored to that person, it's not a bot. If that makes your life easier, go for it. But the main thing here is to track the process so that you are on top of who you're talking to and you're focusing on those opportunities. So are there any points or questions there, Mike?
No, I think that was really clear. That makes a lot of sense, Laura. Thank you. That's good.
No worries. So the final bit of this then is the bit about making it efficient and effective. With this, there are 3 key things that hopefully you've picked out throughout that I'm kind of suggesting that you do in order to make your networking time efficient and effective. Number 1, use some form of database or CRM to track these people. You could just do it on a Google Sheet if that's easier for you. You could have a full-blown HubSpot or capsule CRM system where you get notified with these things. But the biggest thing that you want to be doing is putting data into a database and prompting yourself, especially for strategic partners, with when you need to catch up with these people. If it's a prospect, it's putting them into your sales process. Again, if you can put that into some form of CRM or database, you're not going to lose track of where you are with people, all that jazz. And it just makes your life a lot easier. So absolutely, when you're looking at your networking process as part of sales and marketing, have a system that stores information, stores reminders. And like I said before, for example, if you have a prompt after you've had a one-to-one with a strategic partner, a new strategic partner, have a prompt to send them a resource that breaks down your brand and who you're looking for, so that they've got it to refer back to and send on to other people. That could go into your CRM or your database as a trigger, so that you know that you're taking the right steps for every person that you want to have a relationship with. The main thing is to be picky with your time. I think it's something that a lot of people have learned over the last year. Your time is very precious, and the whole 9 to 5 working life, it doesn't really exist for a small business person. So actually, you can be flexible and picky with where you spend that time. And if a networking group isn't getting the value that you want, whether that's sales, whether that's the relationships or the opportunities for collaborations, if it's not getting there, stop doing it. There's absolutely no pressure to keep it going. But what you need to do is not just stop doing it, but figure out what replaces that activity that can be more effective. And the final thing is measure your return on investment. You would naturally, if you're spending £300 on a Facebook ad, you would want to know what return you're getting from that Facebook ad. It's no different, even at a free networking event. You would charge for your time for a client. So think of it that way. You're spending potentially 4 hours of your day on this networking. Therefore, that's 4 hours at whatever your hourly rate that you're losing from not being working with clients. How are you going to make sure you're getting those 4 hours back in return? And that might be quantified as a sales lead. That might be quantified as collaborative opportunities to build your profile. But what you need to think about is the investment of your time. How are you getting return on that? And that's where the systems and the databases and the processes will massively help you, because you can actually measure and quantify tangibly the return that you're getting based on the people that you're connecting with, like you do other activities. So they're the 3 things that I would take from this. Number 1, database, track everything. Number 2, be picky with your time. And number 3, make sure you're measuring the return on your investment, whether that's time or money. So that's it from me. Short and sweet, doesn't need to be any more.
I think that we made there the point about time, Laura, is really relevant. I think that, like you quite rightly said, I think the last year or so, everyone's kind of picked that up more and more. And when things do start to return back to normal and the face-to-face element starts coming into it, I think that that will become even more relevant, because as you picked on right at the start, that 45 minutes in the car, 45 minutes back, things like that. Now, obviously, one of the benefits of online is that there isn't that. So there's a bit more of a leeway to an extent with it. But people will be really careful of what they, to go to a face-to-face event in the future, real value will need to be added, or you will need to get real value. And so I think it's really important for everyone to kind of think about that as going forward. And like you quite rightly said, value can be measured in many different ways. And something you need a variety, don't you, as you can. Sometimes it might be that you come back and just feel more motivated. And that's great. That's as important to measure as anything else. But it's the variety.
Yeah. No, exactly. You're exactly right. So yeah, it's just about keeping and use that tracker to do that. If you come back feeling motivated, make a note of that, because you know that maybe after that event you're going to have a really productive afternoon. So when you're tracking the value that you're getting from these events in order to make a decision on whether to keep going, make note of those small things just as much as those big ones. Absolutely.
No, that's great, Lauren. I think that's fantastic overview of everything to do with networking, and I think it's, like I said, it's very relevant at the moment. The kind of where we are now and where we're going to be over the next kind of maybe 6 months or so, that it's going to be changing so much. So it's probably a good time for everyone to evaluate what they do and how they do it.
Yeah, definitely.
So last thing for me, Laura, so if anyone wants to kind of find out more about whether it's just yourself or just your kind of thoughts on networking, I'm assuming you're happy for anyone just to contact you.
Yeah, absolutely. You can either get hold of me on LinkedIn or email. My email address is linked to my LinkedIn profile anyway. So yeah, feel free to contact if you want to have a chat about where you're at.
Yeah, fantastic. And I do know that quite a lot of people watch this kind of back on demand, so obviously not being maybe to ask questions during it. So I'm sure Laura will be more than happy if you want to clarify any points or ask any questions, please do so. And obviously to me as well, if you need to. And then finally, just thank you, Laura, for your time. I'm sure everyone will appreciate it, and it's really good, and it's definitely given me some things to think about as well. So you create more work for me, so thank you. Thank you very much, Laura. I really appreciate it, and thank you everyone for watching.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.